What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday out there on this beautiful June 2nd. Welcome back to the Truck Parking Clubhouse, baby. Every Monday night, you're going to catch us on here live roughly 7:30. 7:30 seems to be the going time. 7:30 Central Time, God's time, baby. We're going to be up on here going live with people we partner with to talk about everything going on. So if you are not subscribed to the weekly newsletter Taillights, we're always going to be talking maybe about a few things going on in Taillights. In that newsletter, it's a driver-focused newsletter where we're getting information out about stuff going on in the industry, as well as some content from our partners going trucking around the country. So we're always posting stuff that's going on in there. And also, if you didn't know, when it comes to the newsletter Taillights, any of the feedback goes directly back to me. So if you respond to the actual newsletter that goes out, I will get the response, and I have responded to every single email back. So if you have any questions or input, I value it from you out there. If you have an opinion piece, if there's an issue going on in trucking that you want to talk about, feel free. Matt Dahl, thanks for tuning in. We are live, by the way, so appreciate you jumping in to this live stream. We're going to be going live every Monday night again with the Clubhouse, and I got a fantastic one of our partners on here who's been a big contributor to the newsletter, especially on all things DOT compliance. But again, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, go check it out. We've got a poll in there right now. We've got an election. We had a content contest with some of our partners who posted some videos, and so we need your vote in there to go and talk about it. Also, before I bring on the guests, I did want to let you know about that newsletter. So back in March, I was at the Texas State Capitol, and there was a bill that was in the Texas House, SB 30, had to do with tort reform, specifically to do with nuclear verdicts, kind of related to stuff that went on with the Werner case not too long ago with that several million dollar lawsuit in the hundreds of millions. And it aimed to really, hold the reins on these frivolous lawsuits. And unfortunately, that bill didn't end up making it out. It was set to pass, and then in the midnight hour, there was something that slipped in that the Senate could not agree with on it, and so it ended up dying. So it's hard to see that hard work come to work. You're right, Ralph. I should take off the old banner and I could swap it out with that banner. But here we go. Without any further delay, yes, Matt, appreciate you tuning in. We've got, you're going to be seeing this. You said 8:30 Eastern. We're in Central Time here, God's time, when we're tuning in. So Monday nights, figure drivers are probably parked, hanging out. It's a good time to chop it up. But without any further delay, I want to bring this gentleman on here. He's got some of the best content rolling. His name is Santiago Talamantez. What's up, brother?
What's going on, man? Good to see you again.
It is good. It is good to have you on here. And you're, have like really made yourself such a resource to this industry in so many ways, more than I've seen from really anybody out there. And it's all free 99. So, let's, kind of tell the people a little bit about yourself. So who are you?
Yeah. So I just, I transitioned to calling myself a consultant to just a coach, because I think that's where I provide a little more value to the students that come through my classes. I'm coaching them to run their program like it should be, instead of just consulting it the way that I think it should be done. But just a brief background. I've been working around trucking regs for 20 years. I spent 7 years in law enforcement, majority of that time as a DOT trooper here in Texas. And then I worked for the next 8 years on the company side, learning how to implement all the DOT compliance on the company side, which again exposed me to a world I never knew existed. And that really set the foundation for what I do now as a DOT coach. Is like anybody that has questions regarding an issue, I can see it from both perspectives, which gives me a very unique outlook than the average, retired trooper has, because I spent, that time enforcement and was trained by the government and had to enforce these things. But I also learned how strenuous it is to actually implement them on the company side and everything that surrounds that, right? The cost, the indirect and direct cost of adding these, of trying to comply as best as you can. but at the same time not exposing your company to these frivolous lawsuits that you just mentioned. So yeah, that's kind of just what I do now, man. Is I primarily just present courses all over Texas, and kind of use the 20 years of what I've learned and experienced, and just to help educate the industry as best as I can, and just see it through my eyes, you know.
No, that's awesome. And and technically, and you speaking of courses, you actually give these courses at a college campus in Texas. Is that right?
Yeah, so that happened actually all in the same year. The same year that I also started teaching them in Spanish, I also entered into that partnership with Midland College, where they vetted my material for continuing ed units. And so I've been teaching there. I've been teaching my classes there primarily, but I still do all over Texas. And just last year, I also entered into a partnership with New Mexico Junior College in Hobbs. So I also offer the courses out there, and they're also accredited for continuing education units through New Mexico too. So now I'm in two different states, two different colleges.
No, that's awesome. And for the most part, when it comes to the course you're teaching, are the people who are going, or you have, does law enforcement go to some of your classes as well, or do you just mainly like carrier safety departments?
No, yeah, it really is intended for someone who's going to manage a program, right? Like somebody that is sitting in an office and their owner told them, like, hey, we need you to take care of all the DOT stuff. I help them understand, here's what they mean by handle all the DOT stuff, because I sat in their shoes. I have had a lot of drivers though, man. When I hit the milestone a couple months ago of over 500 students that have sat in that class, I also took the time to kind of dissect down, because I kept track of everybody that's sat through that manager course, um, when they sat in it, where they sat in it, and who sat in it. And I also found that I've had over 100 CDL drivers that have sat through that class. And I promise you, if I had every single one of them on this call, they would tell you, if you're a CDL driver and you go to this class and you think you know what your job fully entails, you don't know. And I'm really glad that I've had that many, because they help me combat this this continuous issue that I have. And you've seen it on my because I know you engage in my content. You'll see all the backlash of like everybody telling me I'm wrong or whatever, you don't know, whatever, which to me is always going to be hilarious. uh but yeah, man, like it's really just for anybody that's trying to transition to that. And that's why I've had a lot of CDL drivers that are looking to do that, right? They're tired of sitting behind the truck, sitting behind the wheel, they got back problems, and they're just ready to make a transition to an admin position. So I'm like, hey, this is a perfect role for you, because here's how you can get you can stay in the industry, get out of the truck, and then still help your company, but now in this administrative role, where I mean it's a crucial position to any company. So I mean, I've had the only outside other than that I've had a couple of insurance agents attend, and I have had a few attorneys inquire, which for them would be absolutely devastating, because now they're going to learn, hey, this is everything this company's supposed to be doing, and they're not doing it. So it's just, I knew it was going to be a matter of time before these kind of not the traditional student I was looking for also see the benefit of where, hey, if I go take that course and learn what they're supposed to be doing, I'm going to use it against them. So
Oh yeah.
whether it's the insurance side saying, hey, I don't want to insure anybody that's not following their program, or they're not keeping their program in compliance, so they learn it. And of course, if you don't have insurance, you're not going to be able to do anything. What I'm more concerned with is what these attorney firms that are looking into it and saying, well, hey, if you're teaching them what they're supposed to know, and I bring them into the courtroom and make them testify to what they're not doing, I've got them. So yeah, it kind of just it's really for anybody that needs and wants that info. But that's who my primary student is somebody that works for a company in a safety management or operational position.
Perfect. Which I actually want to get into that topic of attorneys because that's interesting. But a gentleman asked on Instagram, he was curious if a check engine light will get flagged by DOT.
No, 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 no. Part of it, and I think I just so uh there's a lot of videos I've shot, and I know you noticed the change, but the change was is that I have a social media manager now that is doing these for me, but I actually just made a video on that where I specifically talked about that myth about the check engine light. No, it's not. It's not. It's never been a violation. It's never something I would have written up. So no, it's not. No, now there are some like right. I also did the video on the ABS light. The ABS light on is a violation because it indicates you have a problem with your ABS system, but the check engine light isn't one of them.
No, I figured because I mean a check engine light could literally be. I mean, it's nothing that would make the road conditions like unsafe. Like it could be anything. It could be an oxygen sensor, which
Yeah,
isn't gonna do anything. It's not gonna harm the general public. It's not gonna harm you, the
yeah,
driver. So it's like a check engine light could be. It's. I think the check engine light is everybody's least favorite thing on a car and a semi truck because there's probably
sure.
I mean, there's probably an entire algorithm worth of codes that can fire up a check engine light to where
Yep.
it could be a major issue. My father's advice on the check engine light and my grandfather's advice was always, it's only a problem when it's blinking.
Yeah.
That
Or like just put a piece of tape over it and then you don't see it, it don't hurt you. But no, one thing I don't think we mentioned this in our last discussion, but if you get a violation like that, uh a lot of drivers, I'm surprised, are not aware of this process called data queuing, and that's where you can submit challenges on inspections for violations that you get written up for that you believe are in error, right? And if uh I had a driver get written up for a check engine light, I would 100% data queue that because I know for a fact that's not a violation. um and that process has been around forever, man. It really is beneficial. And in my class I actually talk about it in length because at this point, right, like I'm very impartial, man. Like if someone when someone presents a scenario to me right now regarding anything in DOT, I don't always side with enforcement, I don't always side with the company, and I don't always side with the driver. Whatever circumstances I'm presented, I'm going to tell you what my perspective is on it, right? So in this case, I'm not going to side with enforcement because I think they're always right. No, I'm going to tell you 100% they're wrong, right? Like that's not a violation. They shouldn't be writing that up. And if they do, data queue it and get it removed.
Yeah, I think one of your recent videos actually, which was I think that one really resonated with drivers a lot, was actually on the engine block where you're talking about, because the oil leak is always one that scares people out because I mean, I'm not going to lie, like I think every truck on the road at a certain point, you're going to get a few drops that come out, and it's like
Hmm.
it's crazy because between a semi truck and a car, on a car that's a grave issue and you're probably running into a lot of problems, but on a truck it's
Sure.
almost like status quo. And that to the point of which you said that there's guys who will DOT officers will see kind of oil on the actual engine block, not on the floor, and they'd be recording that as violations, but that's not a violation.
No, absolutely not. And that's again like what I try to explain. And it's really hard in these videos because when you come through my class, I have 3 days to explain in detail the way that this works, right? And I guess just to give you the nuts and bolts of it, right? Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, they write the rules, right? So they're writing the actual law that you have to abide by. The actual inspection process, right? Like the DOT inspectors, or what we could technically would be called CVSA inspectors, that program is run and governed by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, or CVSA, right? So they're the ones that say like the qualifications to be inspector. They're the ones that tell you got to get 32 level ones, you got to get so many hazmats, you got to get so many buses, right? Because they govern the actual inspection program. In the out of service criteria, they also, in addition to the out of service book, the red tag book, they publish different policies that you have to abide by as an inspector, right? So what I was explaining in that video is that when you look at 396.5 in the regulations, it's going to tell you that your vehicle has to be free of oil and grease leaks, right? Because that's the law. However, in the inspection criteria that we're governed by as inspectors, it tells me, well, this policy says I can't write you a violation if it's not dripping, if it's not forming drops and dripping during the inspection. So therefore, even though it's a law, I can't write you a violation because the actual inspection program says I can't do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of why it's hard for me to explain in such a short time, is like, you know, this is where it says that I as an inspector can't write that. Now, the reason that it still happens though, Mike, is you got to remember that if we took every inspector in North America, whether they're federal, state, county, or city, they're all going to interpret different things, 100 regulations, 100 different ways. But I try to show it. That's why, like, everything that I talk about, it says it somewhere. It's not my opinion. I don't teach opinion in my class. I teach law. And so everything that I say in a video, I can show you where it says it. And that's exactly why I pointed it out. And if you saw in the notes, my social media manager, she actually took the verbiage from that operational policy and put it in there, where it said that if you don't have if you don't have an oil leak that's actually dripping during the inspection, you can't write a violation for that. However, if they do, that's again something I'm going to data queue and get removed. So I also recommend for the drivers, when you get pulled over for inspection, take pictures and video of everything they write you up for. Because now when I have a video or a picture to show that stain that they found on the side of my engine or under the differential or wherever else, there's not any drips on the ground, I'm going to data queue it and submit that picture and say, look, there wasn't any drips on the ground. Here's what it says in operational policy 15. Therefore, you have to remove this violation that you wrote incorrectly on my inspection. And that's what I put out with these videos, is I'm not siding with enforcement. I'm showing y'all so that you guys don't get written up for it, because I know it happens because I come from that side.
No, well put. And this gentleman's asking on Instagram, he's curious. I'm not sure. Do you sell any sort of literature by any chance on a website for purchase?
No, I mean, I hand when my students come through class, but I actually did make a video just before I got hopped on with you. But I've gotten a bunch of questions on what book I was looking at. So the book that I was using, that I'm pointing to in these videos, is the federal regulation book. However, I think people don't recognize it because it's not the J.J. Keller book. So it's still the same book, but it's by a company up in Austin called Mancom, and I love their version better than the J.J. Keller one, because it's laid out a lot better. It's not as thick of a book, and I prefer it. It's a little more expensive, but that's why people aren't recognizing it, because it's not the J.J. Keller book, but it's essentially the same book. But so you can buy that from Mancom, and then if you want to buy the out of service criteria, that's sold by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. So cvsa.org is where you can buy that book. And so, like, if you wanted to read that operational policy that I was talking about, if you buy the out of service criteria, they publish that operational policy into the book. If you came to my class, I'd give it to you, but I mean, you got to attend my class because I also teach you how to navigate it at the same time.
Roger
but
that.
I don't. But I don't sell them. I don't sell them independently. No.
Gotcha.
At least I've never considered it.
No, maybe in the future. Well, let's, I think that this has been a really hot topic lately, especially and I think it's important to kind of get your take, because you did submit on the newsletter about it. But what is it going to start looking like moving forward with the enforcement of the English proficiency? What do you think? This just came in. I know we kind of didn't address it, but what have you been seeing on your end? How are you kind of presenting it, and what do you think is going to be happening?
So I wouldn't be surprised if we had happened what happened before. So the only change that happened is that it was reintroduced as an out of service condition during inspection, right? So here's the thing. The requirement of 391.11 B2, right? That's the paragraph that everybody's familiar with, that says that drivers must read and speak the English language sufficiently, converse with the general public, understand highway traffic signs and signals in English, right? That has always been in the regulation, right? But it wasn't always an out of service, right? So yes, you had to speak English, but if I pulled you over and you didn't speak English, I couldn't put you out of service. However, on April 1st of 2012, because the out of service criteria is published once a year and it goes into effect every year on April 1st. April 1st of 2012 is when it was actually implemented as an out of service condition, right? So now when I pull you over and you can't sufficiently speak English, and if some of the tests we used to have back then were the flashcards, right? So if I pulled a guy over, I felt they couldn't speak English or had trouble, I'd say, okay, look, we're going to do this test. I'm going to show you these flashcards. And I don't remember. I think it was like you had to get 7 out of 10, but it would have a road sign, and they would have to tell you in English what it means, right? Or at least have a close an idea of what it means. You had to be. We were actually instructed like be very to be very like broad, I guess, in the acceptance of a definition. So I think it was like 7 out of 10 is what you had to get right. And but what ended up happening over the next couple of years is, let's say you're based here in San Antonio, you send a truck up north somewhere, gets pulled over, driver gets put out of service for not speaking English. So what is the remedy for that? I have to fly a driver across the country to go pick up my truck and deliver my load, if I didn't already lose the customer because our truck got parked for God knows how long. How quick am I going to be able to, at the drop of a hat, fly a driver or send a driver on a bus somewhere to pick up my truck that's parked? Because remember, if I get put out of service for not speaking English, I'm not going to Rosetta Stone that overnight and put me back in service, right? Like, you can't alleviate that. I can't move if I'm out of service. So therefore, and you're aware of this, Mike, you had all these advocate groups, right, that got together, and so you have like I don't remember which one, the like American Latino truckers rights, all these advocate groups, right? They get together, they petition CVSA, they talk about the problem it's causing with the trucks being parked across country. They also, of course, are going to use like a borderline maybe discrimination. And what happens? On April 1st, 2016, CVSA removes it as an out of service condition. So it was already an out of service before, but because it caused all these problems, they removed it. Now it's back again, right? Goes into effect on June 25th of this month. I don't know what the difference is going to be this time, but I would imagine it's going to start causing the same problems. What I have seen is that a lot of companies are now they're starting to, in their like new hire orientations, implement like a English language proficiency test, or they're trying to correct this. They're trying to take corrective action for it. But the crazy part is like, and here's what. Now I got to preface this by saying, I 100% believe every CDL driver here in America should be able to speak English. Like, they have to speak English, right? If I go drive in Mexico, they're not going to, I can't expect them to have to speak in English, right? Just like they shouldn't have to expect me to speak Spanish here. But I believe that every CDL driver here, that's no matter where they're from, they have to be able to speak English. Now, where the fault is on the company side, right, is that when somebody comes into your office and you're going to qualify them to drive for your company, you were supposed to have made sure that they spoke English, because 391.11b2 says you should have done that, right? So you shouldn't have gotten to this point where you have a non-English speaking driver in your truck if you had an adequate hiring process, right? Because that regulation hasn't changed. It doesn't matter if it's out of service or not. That's besides the fact. The law hasn't changed. So you should have never put yourself in that position. So when I see these comments or whatever, all these people talking about like, oh yeah, all these foreign drivers or whatever, what I always question is, who's actually causing that problem? It's the companies hiring these guys. So you're mad at these drivers, but they're not yeah, do they have a part to play in it too? Probably, but they should have never been in that truck because that company should have properly qualified them. And if they followed what 391 says, then they wouldn't have been in the truck, right? So that's again my, like, that I don't know why people are such in an uproar about it, because that's never changed. And then two, when we're talking about and let's even magnify it and get to the level of like some of these drivers that are here illegally, right? Because there are some. If you don't believe that, you're living in a sheltered world. Well, if you're a business here in the United States, it doesn't matter what someone's going to come do for your company. One of the first things you're supposed to do is make sure they have work authorization, right? So like in September 1st of 23, when Texas when Texas implemented this law that says you got to have work authorization if you're a foreign CDL driver, a bunch of my students are like sending me, like, hey, Santiago, how is this going to affect me or whatever? And I'm like, why are you worried about it? You're supposed to make sure they had work authorization, whether they're going to be a janitor or a secretary or anything else, or like, it doesn't matter what you got to have authorization to work in the U.S. period, not just because you're a driver. Additionally, you're supposed to make sure they speak English because 391 tells you that you got to make sure they speak English. So again, it's really an obsolete point because that has never changed. That law in FMCSA has always existed. So it doesn't matter that it's now an out of service, but now it's back to what it was before. Your driver gets pulled over, they can't sufficiently speak English. Well, now they're red tagged, and you're going to have to figure out how to get that truck down the road or get the load delivered or whatever else.
Yeah, no, go on.
Yeah, but I will say this just to finish up, and I know a lot of people may not like me saying this, but it's 100% fact. The majority of crashes with commercial vehicles are not because someone doesn't speak English. It's distracted driving and fatigue, and that's never going to change. And just to prove a point, Mike, how many times have you gotten in an Uber where the person driving you doesn't speak English? Because it's happened to me numerous times.
More often than not nowadays, yeah.
It just happened to me 3 days ago or 4 days ago here in San Antonio. I get into an Uber to go pick up my vehicle from the dealership, and the driver says, "Hey, do you speak Spanish?" "Yeah." "Can you take this call because I don't know what this rider is trying to tell me." So he was trying to get the rider to cancel the ride. So he's like, "Can you talk to him for me?" And I'm like, "Dude," right? So again, if not speaking English was actually causing all these wrecks, how come we don't hear about them? Because that's not the primary problem. Are there some exceptions? Absolutely, right? That was one of the things attributed to that big wreck in Austin, right? But what was actually the reason? Well, the guy was on drugs, right? Like that has your language has no factor in that. So again, I believe they all should be able to speak English, but that's not what's causing the majority of commercial vehicle crashes here in the US. It's always going to be distracted driving, fatigue. I challenge anybody that's listening to this. When you're driving, when you're on a trip next time, when you're going down the highway somewhere on a trip, whatever, every time you pass a truck, look up in the window and tell me how many drivers you see on their phone.
No, that's true. I think the data definitely shows it's distracted driving and fatigue. The only caveat is that, with because what's crazy is again, you're absolutely right. Like we can't be blaming. It's very easy, and we see billboard attorneys do this. Everybody loves to just single out the driver. We love to single out the driver. It's easy to just blame the truck driver when really the responsibility falls on the motor carrier, like the business.
Absolutely.
That like businesses themselves have a responsibility and a duty to follow the law and conduct business the right way. And so really like these issues of, the fact that there are non-English speaking drivers has everything to do with the motor carrier that hires them to begin with. It's not the driver who's
100%.
like, the driver's not sitting around conniving, being like, I'm going to drive trucks illegally in the US. Like, no, that's a human being who is like trying to do what's best for their life in that situation. Or they've possibly, because we had a motor carrier in San Antonio just early last year, where they were kind of coerced, to like their drivers were coerced by the carrier to come over here, and then they wouldn't pay them. So they were bringing them over here from different countries and then they just weren't paying them, but basically indentured servants, so to speak. And that
Yep.
motor carrier was shut down. So blaming the businesses first. I guess the only caveat to where I guess people have made the link to non-English speaking drivers and then the cause of accidents, especially like the gentleman in Austin, would be the again it links back to the carrier he was driving for, which is a shady carrier who's hiring these drivers to begin with, who want these guys to where these guys are primarily, because if you're driving for Werner, Schneider, any of the big companies, like they are super strict on the hours of service, like, and any respectable carrier is like, but the people who are hacking the e-logs and running guys dry, they also happen to be the same company. Like they're bad carriers to begin with. So if they hired American drivers who are speaking English, those guys are probably just as susceptible to causing those same accidents because of fatigue and distracted driving. But also those carriers, but Americans aren't working for those carriers because they want better working conditions, so they have to go out and do it. And I think that's the real caveat. But you're absolutely correct on it. It'll be interesting to see kind of how it pans out moving forward. I think there's going to be a lot of carrier. There could be some good carrier exodus who might have to leave the market because they might not be able to put trucks on the road.
Yep.
So we'll definitely wait and see.
Now, I'm also going to mention this to you because this has always been very troubling to me. And the last time I checked, it still exists and it's still a law. So ironically, with all that being said, our state, Texas, exempts carriers from 391.11b2, meaning intrastate drivers, intrastate CDL drivers don't have to speak English.
Because of cross-border freight.
No, that's intrastate. That's not to the cross-border transportation carriers. That's our intrastate, right? I'm a trucking company based here in San Antonio. I want to hire a bunch of drivers that don't speak English. No problem, because our state law exempts them. And if y'all don't believe me, go to Google, type in Texas Administrative Code 4.12, paragraph B6. And what you're going to read there is the requirements of, it says something to the effect of like the requirements of 391.11b2 shall not apply to intrastate commerce. So that means that an intrastate Texas company doesn't have to require their drivers to speak English, which I have no godly idea why we ever would have adopted that, but it still exists. And I get asked, and again, I don't support that, but I explain law and what law is. And even if I don't agree with it, but I'm kind of curious to see what we're going to do now that there is such an uproar with not only the executive order issued by the president, but also the reimplementation of it being an out of service, right? Because then we would have to have an additional some kind of supplement to say that you can't place an intrastate driver out of service if they don't speak English.
Yeah, I was always curious about that too, because I knew that about Texas, and what's confusing, and I understand it to an extent because of the cross-border freight, so to speak, and because of you're in close proximity to another country, and I think the same can be said of Quebec and maybe the Northeast and different provinces, but so I'm curious if you can just simplify this so it fully exempts it. So because I could see the what's it called? I'm trying to think of the word, I could see the collaboration, or the I'm trying to think of the word where reciprocity between Spanish and English in Texas. But if they to fully exempt it to where maybe now, there's people speaking languages from the Far East, because Spanish is, Spanish is very much well spoken throughout half of the United States, and then half of North America. So it's like you could see the reciprocity in border states, and where I think the exemption has definitely more of that argument for kind of both sides. But then when you get into, again, because if I was to go drive a truck in Russia, I would die. There's no way. Just because I have an American CDL doesn't mean I can go to drive the trans-Siberian highways and truck
Right.
across Russia and understand where I'm going, bridge heights or anything. So it's like when you think about them kind of coming over, it being exempt just in Texas, it seems like he says, oh, it's any language in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not from Spanish. It's just saying the requirements to speak English aren't applicable to intrastate operations. So, yeah, so you could literally have, like, let's say, because so here to drive here in the U.S., right? You can only drive with a Canadian CDL, a Mexican CDL, which for them it's called an LFC, or Licencia Federal Conductor, or a U.S. state CDL, right? So you can only Mexico, U.S., Canada. Those are the only, we three. And this again, back in the days of NAFTA is where all this reciprocity went into effect. But you can only drive with one of those CDLs here in the U.S. What doesn't matter is your nationality, right? So you could literally be like a Japanese foreigner with a Mexican CDL, as weird as that would be, and you could drive here in the U.S., but you got to speak English, right? So that's kind of where they've always gotten away with, like, trying to say, well, man, requiring uh, people to speak English is like discrimination. Well, it's kind of different when you're hauling 80,000 pounds down the road, but yeah, that's the reality, because they're not basing it on ethnicity or anything else. They're just basing on the fact that if you have one of these three CDLs and you want to drive here in the U.S., you got to be able to speak English,
Yeah, I
unless
mean,
you're in Texas, and then you don't. Which, again, I would 100% agree if that was amended to say that if you're like cross-border transportation, because you're bringing, those loads from Mexico into the U.S., yeah, then I could understand that. And I could understand it for those northern states too, where they have the French Canadian drivers. But to just 100% exempt intrastate operations has always been just absolutely mind-blowing to me, because yeah, that means, it doesn't mean just cross-border. It means if you're a company based in Kyle, Texas, and you want to have nothing but non-English speaking drivers, hey, go at it, because Texas says it's okay, which is embarrassing for me as a Texan. But that's just, hey, I don't write these things. That's the other thing. Like, everybody that I get so much, like, I get so much flack, on some of my videos. I'm like, dude, I don't write these laws. I just explain them, right? Like, I don't agree with some of this stuff. Like, I just explain it. But yeah, that's one that's always been crazy, man. But it stands now. But I'm curious to see if Texas will go down the route of changing it or eliminating it.
Yeah, I mean, some things just make sense. I mean, if you're somebody new who just moved here from Germany and you only speak German, I don't think that they should become a police officer, in like Minneapolis, Minnesota, or Dallas, Texas. Like, it doesn't,
Sure.
like, why should our cops, or same thing with, like, if they were going to be I think there's a couple other jobs. I mean, same thing with a teacher. Like, say you're going to go teach in rural Iowa and you only speak Portuguese. Like, you might not be able to execute the job as a teacher if you're living
Sure.
in Waterloo, Iowa, where you only speak Portuguese, so to speak. And that's not discriminatory. It's just you're not in the right part of the world to
Right.
do that job. And there's certain, that's, again, if perfect world, yeah, I get it. But we have borders and states and all these different languages, and again, we're kind of held together. And
Sure.
there's a fine line, I think, between discrimination. Like, we know when it's discrimination and not, and it's not like, hey man, it's because you speak this language and we don't like you. It's, hey, everything around us is in this verbiage, and it's just probably not in the public's best interest. But you want to know what's great is we have all these resources to where you can, learn. You just mentioned Rosetta Stone. Like, you can learn all this, and there's still a pathway for you to kind of get into this industry. And really, for anybody, like, if you live a place long enough, that's the best way to learn a language. But that's kind of going off. I think we've kind of beat that, but I did want to break this down, because this was another lawsuit. There's a big, we mentioned it in the newsletter today, because there's a big Wabash lawsuit that's been going on, which you might be familiar with. But essentially, there was similar to the Werner nuclear verdict. There's a lawsuit going on with Wabash, who's a trailer manufacturer,
Right.
And it has to do with the DOT bumper, and where there was an underride crash. There was an underride accident, and what's crazy is the accident was, so the DOT bumper itself is capable to withstand an underride if the speed of the vehicle hitting the DOT bumper is 35 miles or less, I believe, either 30 or 35. So if the vehicle is going 30 or 35 or less, then the vehicle won't underride under the DOT bumper. And this vehicle was driven by a drunk driver who was going over 55 miles an hour, and they hit the rear end of the trailer, and the people in the vehicle ended up passing away. And so Wabash is in the midst of this massive, like hundreds of millions of dollar lawsuit because the billboard attorney, I'm assuming, who's on this is trying to say that the trailer manufacturer is that there's negligence, so that trailer should have never been on the road. The trailer was, I guess, manufactured in 2004, and so they're trying to upend, and this could upend the entire industry, because you're talking about, like, trailers themselves, like there's double or triple, quadruple the amount of trailers that probably exist with these hub and spoke method than there are power units. And they're in the midst of this lawsuit, trying to say that the DOT, like, that there's negligence in this bumper. But in the newsletter, we just brought up that, they're looking at some of these FMCSA proposals to rescind is the labeling on the rear impact guard. And so I'm curious where that came into play, or if you knew anything about that lawsuit, or does this just have to do with now the impact guard won't be like a violation?
No. So the problem that's existed is that in the impact guard section of the regulations, that there's a bullet in there that's required that the impact guard have the certification label, right? So a bunch of carriers would get written violations because that label doesn't stay on there, right? So in operational policy 15 that I mentioned so many times, there's the guidance in there that tells the DOT inspectors, hey, these labels aren't meant to last forever. So if it doesn't have the label on there, don't write them a violation. So now what they're trying to do is just rescind that specific bullet to remove the label has to be on there. The manufacturer still has to build it to the NHTSA spec, but it's they're just removing the actual requirement for the certification label being on there at the time of inspection. So that and I imagine it's because there's still drivers and companies getting written up for that. Now, when it comes to the Wabash incident, right? I guarantee you they're only doing it because it's Wabash, right? If it was Santiago's trucking with only 2 trucks and a 750,000 umbrella, that ain't going anywhere. So yeah, that's just what exists. And I guarantee you the only reason they're doing it is because they know that Wabash is going to settle out. They're not going to go to court on that. So I mean, yeah, if it wasn't somebody that's self-insured, I'd be really surprised if they're going after them. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of the issues with these drive ends, and the flatbeds that have that extra space between the rear axle and the end of the trailer. But I mean, yeah, there's the only thing I can think of that it would ever favor, like because 100%, this is the negligence of the driver, right? The drunk driver, but nobody will pay attention to that. But what I think would make an impact is when it's sustained damage, right? Like if it's a bump, if it's an impact guard that's already sustained some kind of damage and it is compromised, then maybe I could understand. But I mean, if it was built to the NHTSA standard, which, how long has Wabash been around? 70, 80 years. I mean, and you don't think they have a team of attorneys that know I mean, in degree every single specification of that? Of course, man. So man, this is just one of those cases where they're looking for someone to settle out, and not really because they believe that it was negligence on the manufacturer's part.
No, that makes sense. And kind of a good, I think this is a good question for you on this. And, there's a great attorney who's his name on Twitter for anybody following. His name's Armchair Attorney Matthew Leffler. He talks big on these nuclear verdicts. And I kind of started the show with it, and here in Texas, that SB 30 bill didn't pass. And that was something that was hopefully going to kind of stop these frivolous lawsuits from happening, at least here in Texas. But I think, when something that large happens in Texas, I think it transcends down into other states. But what, in your opinion, like you've worked on the carrier side, what is the best thing a carrier can do to equip themselves against against some of these nuclear verdicts, whether it be through insurance policy or kind of what they can do with their maintenance plan? Like what can a carrier do to keep themselves safe?
So I've advised on this like for numerous years, right? And I still, to this day, I still testify for carriers, and I'll testify against carriers. Um, I can tell you that the number one area that is the easiest for an attorney to attack when it comes to suing a trucking company is going to be their maintenance program, right? And here's how it all kind of ties in. You've been around trucking a long time, right? So you can attest to this. The average driver, when they're involved in an incident, rarely ever take responsibility for their actions. It's been that way for me in the last 20 years, whether it was me working a crash uh, as a trooper or me working, assisting with a crash as a company's safety manager, right? Drivers rarely ever take responsibility. And in my manager class, I show numerous videos to the students because I want to show them and prepare them that, like, when it comes to litigation, it's everybody for themselves. And I guarantee your driver is going to say, well, they're not going to own up to the fact that they didn't do a proper pre-trip and didn't check their brakes or whatever else. They're going to say, oh no, the company's not taking care of the truck, right? Because it's always somebody else or someone else's fault. So the easiest thing for me to attack, especially when it's equipment involved, is your maintenance program, right? So what does that mean? I'm going to look at how often are you doing your PMs? How much maintenance are you actually documenting? And you'd be surprised, man, at how many times, like when I'm solicited for consultation, right? Like I'll have an attorney reach out and say, like, hey, Santiago, we're preparing to go to trial with this against this company. We subpoenaed their documentation. Can you look at it and tell us what you think? And you'd be surprised at how many times I open up folders for a truck or a trailer file and it doesn't have a lot of stuff documented, right? And I'm like, how are you not documenting every time you change your oil, you change lights, you rotate a tire out, you replace the tire? Like, these things they're gonna work against you, because it's real easy when, if I have a driver's testimony saying, well, the reason that this accident happened is because the company's not taking care of the truck. And now I have a vehicle file that proves his point, even though technically it should be 100%, some of it should be on the driver because they didn't actually do a proper pre-trip, like a lot don't. Now I have physical documentation. I have tangible evidence to show the jury that, like, look, this accident happened or this crash happened because look at how little of maintenance. This is a trucking company running this truck 7 days a week, and this is all they've done to it in the last 6 months or whatever they subpoena you for, right? So the definitely vehicle maintenance is number one. Number two is going to be the hours, because the other thing I'm always going to look at is, can I try to prove that the driver was fatigued, right? And that's what actually led to it. So it's really those two things, man. I mean, yeah, sometimes it could be some maybe some overlooking on during the driver qualification process, where you look at, hey, you ran their vehicle record and showed that this driver's had numerous speeding tickets or whatever else, but you said, well, we'll just keep them on anyway. It's rarely that. It's usually number one is maintenance, number two is the hours. So you got to really tighten up those two programs, right? And the hours are the ones that I really worry about. And it kind of ties into, what we just mentioned with what are the number one and number two cause of wrecks, crashes here in the US: distracted driving, fatigue. But part of that is playing into what you do now, right? Because as well as I do, the average driver isn't sleeping as many hours as they should, and they're also eating the truck stop junk food, right? So they're already not in the most beneficial health condition to themselves. But how many drivers do you think are on the road right now that have sleep apnea because they're overweight and they're not sleeping right and they're only sleeping 2 or 3 hours? And that's why those two things are going to be the primary things I look at. Is I'm going to subpoena all the logs so I can see, like, I can look at the inconsistencies of their logs, but I'm also going to attack your maintenance program because that's the easiest route for me to take. So I'd say those two things for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even when I had sold my truck to an owner operator, I gave him a nice stack binder of every PM, the headlight, all the stuff from when I was backed into at the truck
Sure.
stop, like that whole repair bill, quite literally everything. I had a whole and it's hard to believe. I mean, I had the truck for 18 months, and I still had this much stuff like collected onto it because and he asked me for it, and I was like, man, I couldn't have been handing a truck off to a better guy, because he was like, hey, I need every. He's like, I'm looking for every any little bit of maintenance, any little bit of stuff
Sure.
that we're getting it from. And I think and it seems difficult and cumbersome, but if you hang on to that paperwork, there's so many ways. I mean, you can upload it, like you can almost upload it all digitally with your phone into a file, to do that. I think that's the
Yeah,
best way to do it.
and there's a lot of, now there's a lot of these AI apps now that are doing it for you too, where they're like, you got electronic post trips, the DVIRs, you got even electronic pre-trips now. So yeah, I mean, there's always a way. There's definitely a way, because documentation in the end is what's going to save your ass, save you and your company. But yeah, the um I'm glad you pointed that out, because, one of the recommendations I always tell the students is, I know that this is time consuming, man. I know it's time consuming as a shop manager to have to hunt down every truck and trailer and note down every time a bulb is replaced, and every time reflective sheeting's replaced, and every time a tire's replaced and a brake's adjusted. And like, yeah, but the day that you get that subpoena, you're going to wish you'd been doing it, because that's, again, the number one thing for me to attack is, I want to try to prove that you weren't doing proper maintenance. So even if it was the driver's fault for something other than the equipment, I'm going to just say that it was the equipment and it's your fault, because I'm going to win more money from the company. I'm not going to win a lot of money from the driver. Which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time, but as the more recent years of crash data comes out, I can tell you 100%, the majority of wrecks that I research for data and whatever else, drivers are also being sued individually. It's not just the companies now; it's also the drivers.
Yeah, which is what's crazy about SB 30. So that was the entire proposition behind it. Was it would bifurcate the trial, because that's where I think a lot of these issues are, where you need to, before anything can happen, you need to determine who's at fault in the accident before so you need to figure out between the driver and the vehicle, like if there's
Sure.
any accident, if there's an accident involving a commercial vehicle, you need to determine who's at fault first, then you can go after the carrier, which makes sense, because in essence, like if I crashed into your car, and then and we like, or if you and I are involved in a regular motor vehicle accident, and then all of a sudden my lawyer is going after you, and it's like, well, Santiago he had a parking ticket 15 years ago, and they start looking into like your personal history of like your personal life and stuff, like, oh, he actually didn't get an oil change for like 9 months back in 2020. So it's like, before we've ever determined who's at fault. And that's kind of what's going on with these commercial vehicle accidents, because that's what's happening now. It's like the drivers and the carriers are getting sued. So it's like a double payday.
Yeah, and the one thing I know too, and I think we talked about this in our episode, was what I still find to this day is that drivers don't understand first that they may face criminal liability before they face the civil liability, right? Like, because when I showed up to work a wreck, I had to determine first, was there factors that led to this crash that I could charge the driver with criminally too, before you even worry about the civil. And that's not going to go away regardless. And this isn't the first time something like that's been proposed, where they're trying to separate the separation of liabilities. But there's still going to always be the direct responsibility that could end up in criminal charges for the drivers, if I can prove that whatever actions they were taking at the time led to, you know, the injury or even the death of a person because of their actions. You know, even before that civil litigation would come into play, which is going to be, you know, 2-3 years down the road. But that criminal charges is going to be filed, like, you know, pretty soon after the wreck. You know, as soon as you can kind of put everything together and say, yeah, you know what, based on the evidence of what I put together, I was able to determine that I'm going to charge this driver with manslaughter. And you know, and that's pursued way quicker than the civil stuff is.
Yeah, the civil stuff can get kind of dragged on, but yeah, if you
Yeah,
determine, hey, you were going 85 miles per hour and this and that, it's like, oh, well, there's neglect or other charges
absolutely.
you can
Hmm.
toss on. Well, I don't want to take up your entire night, but like I think this is a good place to leave it with asking you. So what, there's, for any driver out there watching, what's the number one way they can walk away from any inspection, level 1, 2, or 3? What's the best way they can get through it as smooth as possible? What's your tips?
Their attitude, man. And I say this so many times in my classes. um I've been sent. I don't. Have you ever seen the video? And I know there's different ones, but this one that I've seen is just the one that took the cake for me. But I'm not sure what state it's in. But the title, I think they sent it to me on TikTok. It's titled like "Driver Refuses to Help DOT," and it's some like crusty old driver. It's got like 3 teeth in his whole mouth, and he's talking about like I know my Fifth Amendment rights and I plead the fifth or whatever. And I actually show that video in my classes because I tell them, like, if this is your driver right here, man, I feel bad for you because you're never gonna win. You're never gonna win against the inspector, right? Yes, I know they make mistakes. Yes, I know they're wrong. Yes, I know they're not mechanics. However, they're the government official. You're not going to win. Your attitude is what plays the biggest part. Now, I never had one to that extreme like that in that video, and I don't. I'll send it to you if you haven't seen what I'm talking about because it's hilarious. Um, but you know, the when you go up there, you got to understand they're like you. They're just trying to do their job, man. Like, you know, they're just pulling you over. They're not wanting to take as long as they want with you. They're just wanting to check your stuff, check your paperwork, check your license, check your equipment. All right, you're good, man. Go down the road. But when you have a guy like that, you know, I tell everybody, if that would have been me, that guy, the inspector, I don't know if he's a trooper or state or whatever he was, man, he had like way 3 5 times 10 times the patience I would have, man. Like, he was super nice. I would have been the complete opposite. You know what I would have done with that driver is you, because you got to remember, man, that's a human being. Even though you're supposed to not take stuff personally, you can't show me one police officer who doesn't take stuff personally when you have that kind of attitude. I mean, that's just the way it is. But what I would have done with that driver, right? That's the kind of inspection where now, especially at my size, I'm gonna crawl every nook and cranny of your truck and trailer and find every little thing that I can wrong because you put me in that position with your attitude, right? And then I'm gonna hope I find something that also red tags you. And instead of just letting you go back to your yard and fix it, have you call a road service to go fix it there. And then I'm going to sit there and wait and not let you leave until you do get it fixed. But before that, I'm going to take an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours. But before that, I'm going to look at your logbook and see, oh, you only got 3 hours left before your 14 hours are up. So maybe this inspection that normally would have taken me 30 minutes is now going to take me 2 hours because there's no time frame, right? It's as long as it takes. And now I'm putting you out of service. I'm going to park you. And now you can't leave because I know you're out of hours for the night. So again, you're not going to win. Like, that's just the way it is, man. Like, don't have that attitude because you're not going to win no matter what. And now you're going to probably get a citation because that's the attitude you had. You're going to get red tagged. You're going to get parked. And then on top of that, you know what I'm also going to do, Mike? I'm going to call your terminal manager and I'm going to say, hey, man, I just stopped one of your trucks and I just want to, by the way, I have a video to show if you don't want to believe your driver's attitude, but I want to talk to you about your driver. So now what if that company says, hey, that's not what we want representing us. And now, hey, we don't really need you right now. So yeah, just go ahead and leave that truck and we'll get someone else to take that load for you. So look at the consequences that can come from mere attitude, right? Um, so yeah, man, like that's the number one thing. But obviously, in addition to that, is check your stuff right. Like that's, I mean, how else? How else? And don't be because I know it's probably not just me that gets it, but don't be so close-minded when you realize that you don't know as much as you know, right? And that's my intent with this, with the classes, with the videos. I'm not trying to say like I'm this big shot that just knows all this stuff. I'm actually trying to help you guys not get written up for these things, right? Like I want you to understand, here's what I'm explaining, here's where it says it. I don't want you guys getting written up for this, because those little things add up. And to expand on what we were just talking about with the litigation, right? If you're a driver that's constantly getting written violations, you don't think I'm gonna run your PSP and show that to the court too, and say like, okay, he says he's a good driver, but look at this DOT history, right? Because they keep 3 years of inspection history on you for every driver, and you see constant violations for being in violation of your hours of service. Well, now you're showing a pattern of behavior, right? And the same thing comes with the equipment. If you ran a PSP report on a driver you were going to hire for Lombard Trucking, and that driver has constant violations for washer fluid, fire extinguisher, triangles, right? What does that tell you right off the bat?
He doesn't pre-trip.
He doesn't pre-trip, right? And now you have it documented in an inspection report that's going to stay with the driver for 3 years. And in that time, if they're involved in an incident, you bet, Thomas J. Henry's going to run that PSP to show the court, oh, by the way, this is the kind of driver that they're hiring. So you got to look at the actions you take today. The pre-trip that you don't want to do today may not hurt you today, but it could hurt you for the next 3 years. When 20 minutes after you didn't do your pre-trip, you get pulled over for a DOT inspection and you got 15 violations. How do you explain that? Because in litigation, I'm going to put you on the stand and explain to me, why didn't you pre-trip? Like, I mean, these are things, again, that I wish that obviously the courts don't let you video, right? I really wish I could take videos of these scenarios where I can tell you, like, the way that the drivers get questioned on the stand by these attorneys. Man, they are so ruthless, Mike. Like, I feel bad for them at times, because they are absolutely brutal, man. Like, and that's why I try to tell them, like, dude, I know you've had your CDL 20 years. I know I've never been a truck driver, but what I do has nothing to do with truck driving. In the 3 days of a DOT compliance manager course, we never talk about driving. We talk about everything that surrounds the driving, but we never talk about anything to do with driving. And those are the things that they're going to question you on, because it's part of your responsibility as a driver to know. So yeah, is it a big deal to me that you don't know where your triangles are supposed to be placed if you break down? No. But where is it going to be a big deal? When you go into a courtroom, you tell them you've been driving for 35 years, but you don't even know where your triangles are supposed to be placed. When someone that's fresh out of CDL school knows that, because they just learned it, right? So yeah, man, that's, again, watch these videos with that mindset, not with, hey, I just want to prove Santiago wrong because I've been driving and no, it doesn't say this. And that's all I get, for the most part. But, there are the drivers that I get messages from that, like, appreciate it and thank me for what I'm sharing. And yeah, in the end, that's what I'm trying to do, man, is I'm trying to educate and help not just the carriers, but the drivers too, because again, I'm an advocate for drivers, man. Like I advise drivers all the time, because I know they also work for these companies that you were talking about earlier, that are like, yeah, hey, Mike, hey, here's the keys, go get in the truck. And when they have that situation, I tell them, like, hey, see if you can get them in text telling you this, or see if the dispatcher will text you like, oh yeah, you only have 2 minutes to pre-trip your truck. Because again, I look at it I look at it very impartially. If now you're telling me that your dispatcher is pressuring you and telling you like, hey, they need that truck out there, so here, you got 2 minutes to go check it. Now, well, I'm an advocate on your side. Now I'm going to fault the company, because now I'm going to blame the company and say, like, how are you, why are you mad at the driver for getting an inspection with a bunch of violations when you're not even giving them the time to pre-trip? So again, I'm looking at every situation. To me, is very neutral. I'm neutral. Like, if I'm going to side with you as a driver, if you tell me, yeah, Santiago, my company's not, they're not letting us do pre-trips. Well, okay, well, what can we do to protect you as the driver, right? So yeah, that's just again where I want the mindset to kind of change, and that's one of the reasons I set out, 5 years ago, is to try to take my experience in education over the last 20 years and help the industry overall. Like, I'm not always on enforcement side. I mean, yeah, that'll always be in my blood, but if they're wrong, they're wrong. And there's numerous times that I advise people to data queue a violation because I know what they're writing them up for is incorrect.
No, that's well put. And I think even at first glance, I mean, it's just like it's really easy to see that you're pro driver because, yeah, I mean, a lot of what you say is, when it comes to the truth, like sometimes the truth is hard to hear for certain things. And but even going back to like talking about that bad attitude, like you said, the job of a driver is very hard, and that guy in that video, I mean, I'd love to see what his day looks like, and maybe there's stuff going on in his life, and I get it, but I mean, this is also why I preach so much about driver health and fitness and overall wellness, because then, I think that improves people's attitudes. But if, that's kind of besides the point, where even though, a driver could be upset that a DOT officer is giving him an inspection, giving him a hard time, and, he's trying to prove a point. It's not that it's like, okay, and you might be putting yourself, it's just you're opening the door. Then, once and that's how and this is just life advice. I mean, it's how you approach anybody. And I was just talking to a gentleman from Truck Stop, VP of Corporate Strategy. Like, when you're a driver, even as a company driver, everybody you come in contact with, everybody you speak to, like, you have to, holding yourself to that standard of being a professional, because at any point, anybody can be a customer or future employer, and even down to that DOT officer. Whereas if you have a good experience with him, he could be somebody who ends up helping you out one day. And so, like, and just as you said, I think the most important part is if you open the door up for, because again, if you're being an asshole to the DOT officer, they're going to be one right back. And if they end up digging and getting in every nook and cranny, it might not hurt you now, but like you said, it's about knowing that you don't know if you're going to be in a courtroom in 5 years. You don't know if you're going to be in the courtroom in 15 years. But it's almost like the reason why you don't want to. It's the reason why your parents don't want you to stay out late as a kid. They don't, you don't want to get any tickets. You don't want anything on your record. So in case you get jobs one day. And it's the same thing. Like, your Yep. job, when you have that CDL, it's a whole different, you're under a whole different jurisdiction now. Of, it's not just your job. Like, you're talking about things that can have some effect, if you're in a courtroom, because the DOT officer, he could be nice or mean or what have you. He could be neither here or there, but that DOT officer is never going to be as bad as Thomas J. Henry or any of those guys up on billboards.
Nowhere near.
They are cold killers, and
Yep.
are out, like, there's a reason why their billboards say billions of dollars and we win millions of dollars, because they are cold hard killers to get those millions of dollars.
Yeah, and I think I think probably the most conceited one I ever saw, and I don't think it's the Hammer in Houston. But I remember I used to show a billboard in my class of an attorney that's actually standing on the hood of a tractor. Like, he's standing on the hood and he's got his arms crossed. And I was like, you see the subtle message that guy's sending to you in that billboard? Like, I own your company. And yeah, man, you're just having that kind of attitude, just opening up yourself. And, like you said, if that, you got to remember, if you had a lot of positive experiences with that one DOT officer, that may be the one that you can ask your attorney to, like, pay on the side and say, hey, man, will you come testify in this part? And that guy might say, like, yeah, man, I'll come and speak on your behalf. And say, like, yeah, the times I pulled him over, his equipment was fine, whatever. Like, you don't understand the beneficial relationships you could make, but instead you want to have this negative attitude because you've been driving for 25 years and you know it all, and nobody can teach you anything because you've been God's gift to trucking. And that's like a lot of the attitude that you get with a lot of drivers. And Like for me, when I had the drivers that had just like the very laid back attitude, man, there was times that I'd find violations and I wouldn't write them up. I'd tell them like, hey man, I should write you up for this, but I'm not going to, because like you're cool. You've been great. Every time I pull you over, you got a great attitude. So you know what, man? Like, don't worry about it. Dude, I did that time with weight violations where I should have wrote him a weight ticket and I said, hey, just make sure next time you don't get this many yards. Like I can cut you once, but I can't do it more than once. So yeah, man, like, and I think a lot of guys have that attitude for the most part, but there are some that do have that approach that you're talking about, right? Like, yeah, there are a lot of very unapproachable officers, but that's not the majority. So, but again, man, you're never gonna, regardless of their attitude, you're never gonna win as a driver, as a company, because they're the ones that have you detained at the time, and the action they take is gonna affect you. Nothing you do is gonna affect them, but the actions they take are gonna affect you.
No, absolutely. So, but hey, man, where for any of the people watching now, we got some people tuning in live. Where can they kind of find you, follow along? Because for anybody watching, Santiago is posting regular content on stuff you can do to, CYA, cover your ass on stuff. Where can people find you, or if they want to get a hold of you, where can they get a hold of you?
So, I mean, they just follow the socials. I think I think they primarily go first up on Instagram. So my business Instagram is just at Safety Compliance Training, my company name. My TikTok is Safety Compliance Training. I couldn't fit the whole thing in there, but if you just type that or type in my name, they'll all pop up. But I'm also, because I have had this like explosion in following, I'm also about to launch a subscription where like I'm gonna go live and hopefully invite you at times, because you're a driver that can help me kind of subscription side for the paid subscribers, and be able to answer the questions that I can't get to, because I mean there, some of these videos are, some of them are up in like the 100,000 views, and I know there's a lot of questions that I can't get to, but yeah, just to be a separate resource like that, they're and if they ever have questions on training and stuff, they can always just go to my website and send an email. They can call my office phone, but I'm rarely ever there. But yeah, man, I'm just a resource and someone that's trying to help the industry move in the right direction, and protect companies and drivers as best as I can.
For sure, man. Dude, I want to thank you for coming on. We're definitely going to have you, like I said, I'd love a regular appearance for you to jump onto these live streams, because we have a lot of drivers who follow our account. Everything we do at Truck Parking Club, by the way, has everything to do with helping drivers, and that's what we've been doing the past several years, with adding more available truck parking out there for drivers, because that's a huge benefit. Because we had a gentleman on Instagram ask, he's asking some stuff about autonomous, and I'd be curious to get your opinions on that, but we'll save it for another time. But for anybody watching, as we walk this out, again, we got let's see, I want to let the people know, especially if they're looking to get parked tonight. If they were looking to get parked, they can use, they can go ahead and get, if they're out there over the road and they need some parking, you can use Santiago's code, which is safety20. It'll get you $20 off your first booking or your next booking. So it should be able to get you a free spot. And again, if you're going to use Santiago's promo code and use the parking spot, make sure you give yourself a good pre-trip and post-trip before you get out there. But with that, guys, that's going to do it for the Clubhouse. Come on back next Monday. We've got a lot of people. I know Natasha's been watching us on Instagram. Natasha's an amazing trucker who's got her own coffee brand. We've got Adam from 51 Logistics. We've got a lot of drivers that we're looking to come on here. And before we sign off, to let you guys know, if you're a driver out there who makes content, like I see you out there, Pop Tark on Trucking, you're on YouTube. If you are a driver out there who is very passionate about helping the industry, leaving the industry better than you found it, you could join Santiago and some of our other partners out there. We'll work together on that, especially with helping drivers find parking. But with that, guys, we're going to be out. We will see you next Monday at the